Hey everyone, welcome to this week's live. I have a special guest with me on this LinkedIn Live, Ahmad Imam. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you? It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. It's great to have you. So, we're going to be talking about content creation on LinkedIn today. So, if you are joining us live, it'd be awesome for you to put a thumbs up in the comments so that we know that you're here. And you might even be thinking of some questions as we go. And so, pop in your questions as we go on this topic. I know it's a really hot topic for a lot of people on LinkedIn right now. So if that's you and you've got questions, I'll do my best to multitask and have a look at the questions coming through as we kind of flow with the conversation. And if you're catching the replay, just put in hashtag replay down below as well, so that we know you caught this as well. So it is awesome to have you here, my friend. We've talked about this topic lots before, been on lots of panels and things together when it comes to LinkedIn. And so for those of you who might be new to Ahmad, I'd love to throw to you. Give us your little 30-second intro around who you are and who you help.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I've been on the platform for about, I think 5 to 6 years now. And through that, I've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, had a lot of wins. And I understand the importance of content creation, how it can work for you. I'm the founder and CEO of a business called The Executive Brand, and I help executives and sophisticated founders essentially boost their personal brand, and that is through a very strategic brand blueprint, as well as content creation and deliberate engagement. So it works well. I've been able to do it myself, and I have the honor of helping many other people do it.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know you've grown your network very significantly in that time that you've been on the platform now as well. I think about 800,000 followers, I think, perhaps, Ahmed, correct me if I'm wrong, around
Yes.
that. Yeah, which is awesome. And so I think, content creation is a huge part of that, right? In terms of growing our networks and making people aware of what we do, growing our personal brands, and also letting people into our worlds a little bit as well. And I'd love to hear from you, because I know you work with a lot of executives in this space, and I work with a lot of business owners in the space as well. And I'd love to hear just your thoughts around, when people start to think about content on LinkedIn, what are some of the key mistakes or key challenges and problems that you see that pop up pretty early on for people that are, wanting to dive into doing some content on LinkedIn?
Happy to talk to that. And as I mentioned, I've made so many mistakes myself. So a lot of these are mistakes I've made personally.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. And it's all, I mean, they're all lessons, and it's all trial and error for the most part. However, you can learn from other people's adversity and other people's mistakes. And one of the biggest mistakes I made initially was putting myself out there and not understanding to what end. As in putting myself out there without having a deliberate strategy or understanding what I'm trying to achieve with my content. And so initially, a lot of my content was, a little all over the shop. There wasn't one specific key topic or theme. I wasn't really sharing my expertise that aligned with my services for my business. And what I did was I built a significant following because people got to know me, which ended up working out well. But the best way to cut through that is understanding that you don't need a significant following. You really just need a targeted following. And the best way to do that is to focus and to really understand who your clients are, what their pain points are, and then provide a solution via your content that shows your expertise. And so that's really what I focus on now, and what I help my clients focus on. And it works well, So the other mistake I would like to share is I think it's very, very tempting to see who is in the feed and who is doing well in the feed and the engagement that people are receiving. And you see people posting, many different things, and it can be very, very confusing as to know what direction to go in. Right. So people that are new to LinkedIn might jump on a feed and see YouTube videos, as in, a YouTube video about a cat or a dog that goes viral. And all of a sudden people think that that's what they need to do. And that can be very, very overwhelming and confusing. So what you need to realize, and I'm obviously not talking to you, I'm talking to the audience, but what we need to realize is that when you focus on your expertise and you post content
Mm.
about your expertise, it might not necessarily get a huge amount of engagement because you're really niching down and you're talking to your ideal audience. But what it will do, you will actually join the conversation in your clients' heads. And so if you really understand their pain points and what they're going through right now, you're
Mm.
actually going to touch on a topic that they're likely thinking about, and that's far more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's, it can be really tempting, like you said, just to see what other people are sharing on the news feed and thinking, oh, well, I have to go and do that. Or, I have to copy that kind of flavor and approach. And it might be completely off brand for you, or it might be completely different to actually what your clients or your market or your customers or whoever it is that you're wanting to get in front of
Yeah.
can be completely different and nothing that they need. So I think you make a really good point around being very specific and knowing like what is your real objective on the platform as well. Because I think, if I think about some of my clients as well, what happens is they might have come from a different context. Maybe they've had a really high level corporate career and now they've found themselves in their own business, and things really start to change, and some of the things they want to share starts to change. And so you have to really think about,
Yeah.
who you're trying to attract right now, where you're heading, and actually move your strategy towards that. So I think you nailed it on the head there. Actually having a strategy
Yeah.
is probably a really good place to start.
And you touched on a great point. Like I've been on a platform long enough now where
Mm.
I've done the content creator thing, being a part of a corporate, as in being an
Yeah,
employee. I was
yeah,
the director of a property uh, organization about 3-4 years prior, and I've also
mhm,
been a content creator as a small business owner. And
yeah,
so yeah, they're very different things, and the way you approach LinkedIn and content is also very different. So
mm,
I think that's worth probably touching on, because we're going to have people that are executives tuning in that
mhm,
may be C-suite, they may be directors, they may be board members, they may be managers,
yeah,
and the way you approach that might be a little bit different to having a small business and let's say staff maybe 50 or less.
mhm,
And so when I was a director of a property business, I found that I had to be conscious of obviously the direction of the business itself. I had to
yeah,
be conscious of the way I appeared and make sure it's aligned not only to the organization but also uh, the uh, the rest of the executive team, and
mm,
also aligned with the CEO's message.
yeah,
And the best way to approach it, let's say as an executive, for any executives watching or any C-suite members watching or any managers watching,
mm,
is to really be an ambassador for the organization, and that is to be conscious of the content that you put out, knowing that you're going to be tied to the organization and a reflection of the organization, and to make sure that these days there are many, social media policies to make sure it obviously aligns with the
mm,
social media policies of the organization, but at the
yeah,
same time to be an ambassador in the sense that any news about the
mm,
organization, you have the ability to control that narrative. And
yeah,
that doesn't mean that you make things up. It just means
mm,
that when good things happen, you highlight them,
yeah,
and you put yourself out there as a voice for the
mm,
organization. That has so many benefits, not only in terms of your own personal brand within the organization and outside the organization, but also then being recognized as an industry leader both in and out.
yeah,
And then as a small business owner or as a business owner or entrepreneur in general, obviously you want
mm,
to make sure that the content that you're putting out is again positioning you as an industry expert and industry leader, but you have a lot more flexibility in terms of what you can put out there that
mm,
ties into your personal brand and your own personality, your own values, your own thoughts, your own opinions. And so
yeah,
regardless of your role, regardless of what business
mm.
you're in, it's very important to create content and targeted content, but just being mindful of the approach that you take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's, like you said, there's a really fine line and a balance depending on your situation about how far you want to push it when it comes to really, showcasing your full personality and your values, and really sort of having a really strong voice on the platform, but also being mindful of the situation you're in, whether you're working with an organization and what's appropriate and what's not as well. So I think it really depends on your situation, like how far you want to push that. But I think just like as an overall theme, I don't know about you and what you've been seeing on the platform since getting started, but if I think back, way back when to my executive recruitment days on the platform, it's a very different landscape on LinkedIn than it was sort of 5 or 10 years ago when it comes to sharing content. There was a time on this platform where you couldn't even share a video. It was very much corporate articles, blogs, those sorts of things that people were sharing. And even to the point where people would share something that was maybe a little bit more personal, or maybe something that, shared an opinion or something like that about themselves. And you'd have all these people that would just sort of crush you and say, this should be on Facebook. Like, what are you doing on LinkedIn? Because it's been very much, I guess, like the professional platform on social media for all of these years. But I've started to notice quite a big shift in that regard. And I don't know if you've been noticing the same thing around, it is okay now to share your personality on LinkedIn. And in fact, when people can do that, and when they're brave enough to take that step and show a little bit of personality on the platform, it can actually bring like really unprecedented results in terms of engagement. Are you seeing the same thing with people you're working with and some of the approaches you take as well?
Yeah, very much. And look, I would even recommend and suggest, putting your personality out there, and obviously we have to be conscious of certain topics and things like politics or religion, regardless of where you're at, whether it's on LinkedIn or in a taxi or an Uber, there are things we need to be conscious of talking about. But in terms of your personality, I mean, people gravitate towards it. And what you'll find is you'll attract people that believe the same things that you believe, that have similar interests and values, that appreciate your viewpoint and perspective on certain matters, and it'll make them far more excited to be working with you. In fact, I've had clients in the past that reached out to me not because of the content that I was putting out that showcased my expertise, but some of the content that I put out that showcased some of my opinions about values and how I approach certain conversations, how I approach people in general, and they appreciated my values more than anything. And then as a result, they checked out what I did and reached out to me as a result. So look, I would highly recommend it, and it's important, I think, to share a combination of content that showcases your personality and content that showcases your expertise, because you're going to find that one of them, especially the personality type content, will build trust personally, and the expertise will build trust professionally. And having a combination of both is very important.
Yeah, I think it's something that we need to build on the platform is, a human connection, because, networking and being professional on LinkedIn has always been part of the ethos of this platform as well. And so when we kind of lead with that human element first, I think that really, really helps to connect. Really, really helps you to like find your tribe on the platform as well. Like we said, it's not about having to speak to everyone or build a massive big following. It's more about, being targeted with what your objective is and who you're trying to reach out to. And it's actually a great thing if people don't resonate with your message as well sometimes. So it's great because it means that you're attracting the right kinds of people that you want to work with, that really gel with you. And that's good as well. And so I think that's a really, really important point, or something that I've been seeing on the platform as well is, it's no longer you have to be, very stiff and professional. You can share some things that are, milestones in your life and things like that as well. So I think that's something that I've noticed as a bit of a trend.
It's been interesting because I'll tell you what, when when we started on a platform, which was probably around a similar time, was very, very stiff and robotic, and we just had to post very, very professional content, and heaven forbid we posted anything else. And then there was a period where it became relatively flexible, in a sense that people appreciated when people posted things about their personality, or perhaps revealing a few layers behind some of the masks that we put on when we're at work.
Yeah.
And then I've noticed another trend, probably as of the last couple of years, which I'm sure you can relate to, where a lot of executives and a lot of people in, whether they be sophisticated entrepreneurs or sophisticated founders, are a little afraid to be, cancelled. That anything that they might post might get them cancelled. We've seen a lot of celebrities, maybe post one video or one photo, and all of a sudden, all of their hard work for the last few decades has gone.
Yeah.
But I don't want people to be afraid of that. But it's also the reason that focusing on your brand and understanding your brand voice and the messaging that you're putting out is also very much aligned with your business, what you're trying to get across, and also your personality. But understanding that, there's a line there as well that many of us, shouldn't cross. And the way I put it to a lot of my clients is it's the equivalent. LinkedIn is the equivalent of being at a networking event. Right. I mean, there's obviously lots of flexibility there in terms of the things we can talk about, and we're there to make friends and find partners and find associates and colleagues and people that resonate with us and our messages and our business. But at the same time, you want to be conscious of, let's say, for example, not having a few too many drinks and doing something that's strange, right? So there's a certain level of behavior that's expected, but at the same time, people should be relatively free to discuss the things that they truly care about. So that's an important message that I want to pass on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it adds, there is a fear factor there for a lot of people with getting started with content. I mean, even for myself, I went from headhunting CEOs on the platform very much behind the scenes. I was a self-confessed LinkedIn lurker and LinkedIn stalker where I'd very much be behind the scenes. And then to really step out of that and actually share your thoughts and share what is on your mind and your expertise. There can be all sorts of things that run through your mind. You're worried about being judged by other people. You're worried if you sound smart enough on the platform and all these sorts of things. And I know my clients go through that a lot when they start to share content on the platform too. And I think it's really good to bring that back to just you're at a networking event and it's just like how you would speak to people there. And it's just doing it in an online forum as well. But I think it's really natural if people listening to this have a bit of a fear factor around initially sharing content. And I know for speaking on behalf of myself and probably the same for you, it does get easier over time. It's kind of like ripping off a Band-Aid sometimes where you've got to get over those first few hurdles. And then you kind of find your flow and you kind of find your voice, you find your tribe, and you get a lot stronger in your message and what resonates, what doesn't, what gets engagement, what doesn't, all sorts of things as well. And so for those people that might be listening to this where maybe they are sharing content, maybe they've got over that initial hurdle of the fear factor and they started to put some content out there, but they're not sure if their content is working or not. Maybe they're putting a lot of time and energy and not seeing much return in terms of, whatever their return is they're looking for, whether it be new clients, customers, partners, all sorts of things. What would be your advice if someone's sort of in that rut at the moment where they're wondering, like, is it all worth it? I'm putting all this time and energy into it. What am I doing wrong? Is it all worth it? What would you say?
Yeah, and I 100% resonate with that. I remember when I first started, I was terrified, and the hardest part by far is getting started because everyone worries more or less about the same thing, and that is, are people going to see it? Are people going to care? Am I going to get trolled? What are other people's opinions? All of that stuff is absolutely normal, and it goes through most people's heads, I think. And I absolutely went through that, especially when I started putting out video content, because I found that a little bit more vulnerable, right? I mean, it's hard to hide on video, right? So you think you're going to get judged even more. But I would say to people, make sure you're looking at the right metrics, and understand what the right metrics are for you. And like I said, initially, we all think that the right metrics are how many likes and comments we're going to get. And, the more likes and comments we get, that means that the more people, genuinely liked it. And that if we don't get likes and comments, it means that it was a fail and no one cares
Mm.
about us and that we shouldn't ever post again. And, all the other things that go through our head.
Put the tuna over our head and hide away.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was such a
Yeah.
bad idea. I'm never going to do this again.
Yeah.
It's a process. And I found that it probably took, you're right. You definitely get far more comfortable after a few pieces of content, after a
Mm.
few pieces of content. But look, it genuinely takes about, at least 6 months before you start to notice that you build a community, as in before you start to notice that, certain people are turning up to your content and, thankful for your content or looking
Mhm.
forward to your content. And that's quite a lot of content when you think about it. Like even if that's 2 pieces of content per week, right? We're talking about 8 pieces of content per month, and,
Mhm.
and it adds up. And the other thing to note is that not everyone's going to see each piece of content, right?
Yeah.
Right. So even with the large following that I have, when I post, of course, not all of my followers see each piece of content. You'll
Yeah.
certainly reach a certain percentage of people, and that might realistically be maybe anywhere from 2 to 5% of your following.
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
And so it's important that we're being very consistent with our content, because you're actually going to reach different people with your different pieces of content. And some of your following might see 1 piece of content per fortnight, and some of them might see, one less frequently.
Yeah.
But I would say consistency certainly helps, and understanding what the metric is for you. And by that, I would actually be focusing on things like views as opposed to likes and
Mhm.
comments. In the
Mhm.
same way that on YouTube, for the most part, when we look at a video, we're looking at how many views that video got as opposed to how many likes or dislikes it received.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'll be focusing on is the conversations that you're having as a result of your content.
Yes.
And often it's the conversations that are happening offline in direct message,
Mhm.
or it might be conversations that you notice that you're having, at any events that you turn up to,
Yeah.
or that you're having at work with other colleagues. And you'll
Mhm.
start to notice when you put out content that you're having a lot more of those conversations. And they're the metrics that I think are by far the most important, not only because they lead obviously to clients or customers, but they lead to some really impactful conversations. And that's when you notice you're making a difference. And
Yeah.
look, the likes and comments will come over time when you're putting out content that helps, but it's
Yeah.
not the right metric to focus on initially.
Absolutely. I love that because I think it can feel really good when we get a bunch of likes and comments. We're all human, so we all like a bit of a pat on the back when things happen. And so we get that kind of instant gratification from the likes and the comments. But totally agree with you. It's about, consistency over time, really honing in your message as well, and not forgetting about the LinkedIn lurkers. So, just to
That's right.
validate your point,
That's right.
um, I was at a networking event only a few weeks ago, and I had 2 people at that event come up and say, "Hey, I've seen you on LinkedIn and I've, watched your content." And I'm like, "I have no idea who these people are." They've never interacted with me or anything, but they're there and they're watching and they're lurking. And, my client Melvin had an experience of this recently where, shared a piece of content and wasn't really happy with it because it didn't get as many likes as what he thought. But he had a conversation behind the scenes, just like you were saying in LinkedIn message, where the CEO had reached out to him, brought him on for a new consulting gig, which was worth 300K. So that all kind of happened from a post that he didn't really think was any good.
And it happens all the time. And
Yeah.
anyone that starts posting content will notice the same thing. Look, LinkedIn has an interesting culture. I mean, on
Mm.
platforms like the TikToks and the Instagrams, I think they're very, very social.
Yeah.
And people tend to quite easily engage on LinkedIn. I
Mhm.
think
Mhm.
for the same reasons posting content makes people a little nervous. I
Yeah.
think engaging on content can make people a little nervous as well. And sometimes
Yep.
in a professional setting, people just don't want other people to know that they're engaging on a piece of content.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
and each their own. But I think that also becomes easier when you start posting content yourself.
Yeah.
And when you start posting content, you realize that people, you really appreciate people commenting on your posts and engaging on your content, and so you
Yeah.
start realizing that maybe you should be doing the same with other people. So my
Yeah.
code is that if I read a piece of content from you, or if I
Mm.
absorb a piece of content from you, I will at the very least, like it.
Yeah.
But the message there, and I'm really just reinforcing what you're saying. Do not assume that if your content does not get a whole bunch of likes and comments that people are not seeing it, because I can
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you they are. And
Yeah.
you'll have so many conversations about that exact thing, and you'll be like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe this person even saw my content.
That's right.
But it's amazing the conversations you'll have. And I'll even tell you a quick story. I
Mm.
mean, you'd be familiar with this, but obviously some of the listeners might not be. In
Yeah.
terms of who might be watching and observing your content. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've also had situations where I've received job offers or opportunities from people that I didn't even know were observing my content.
Yeah.
I even had a royal family member reach out to me from the UAE and
Mm-hmm.
ask me and invite me to an event to speak in Dubai when I had no
Yeah.
idea that person was even watching. Like I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have even considered it
Yeah.
in my wildest dreams. And so, yes, it's very real. People do observe, and this is why I mentioned that an important metric is more important than likes and comments is views, right?
Yeah.
Because with views, obviously, you can tell how many views you have received on your content, how many people might have
Mm-hmm.
potentially observed it, and you can also
Yeah.
see then. Briefly at least, depending on how you're checking your metrics and your analytics, but who's also viewing your content in terms of their
Yeah.
roles and the organizations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really, really good point. And, the really big picture here that I think we both kind of touched on is you just have to put yourself in the way of opportunity. LinkedIn, there's opportunities out there that you might not even be on your radar, you're not even thinking about them. But the fact that you just take that first step, you put yourself in the way of where opportunity could be. There's really endless opportunities out there that can come your way, and the best ones are the surprises, like the story that you
Uh,
shared. So I think
the
that's awesome.
surprises are
And
awesome.
yeah, yeah,
And
no,
the surprises could be, being asked to speak on a podcast or a panel
yeah,
or a speaking engagement,
hmm
or job opportunities or promotions, or even
hmm
just getting a pat on the back from a senior in the business or a colleague or a partner. They're all really positive things.
yeah,
And this is also why it's important to be consistent in showcasing your expertise.
hmm
We think sometimes because the posts tend not to be too popular. Of course, if you're niching down into a particular ideal client profile,
yeah,
so it won't get the same amount of, let's say, likes and comments as, let's say, a more casual type post that appeals to
hmm
a wider audience. But you're speaking directly to your client, and so that is a post that could result in a quality conversation offline.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know that over the years, that's how we've ended up on similar panels and things and speaking gigs together, just through
Yep.
people, finding us and reaching out on LinkedIn as well. So definitely validated there. I want to switch gears a little bit. I'm mindful of
Yep.
time, but I've got one final thing that I think is really important to discuss, because there's probably a few people listening to this going, it all sounds great, but
Yeah.
my day to day is so packed. I'm so busy. I can't even think beyond anything that I'm doing on my to-do list right now. How on
Yep.
earth am I meant to fit in creating content and starting to get things happening on LinkedIn? So I just wondered if you had any time-saving hacks or anything that works for you when it comes to integrating your content strategy into your daily work life, and what that kind of looks like as well. And this is a topic that we could talk hours on. I actually ran a
I know.
session for my
I know.
members on this recently, but it's something that we could talk for hours on. But I just love a couple of quick tips from you if you've got anything to share.
Yeah, I'll give three helpful tips that have very much helped me. And look, all of us, especially if you are a business owner. I mean, you don't even have to be a business owner. If you are an executive or you have a job, period,
Yeah. Yeah.
our time and attention is often focused on that, and we're exhausted by the time we come home, and it's the last thing that we're thinking about in the morning because we're thinking about
Mhm.
work. So you think to yourself, God, how am I supposed to squeeze this in? But there
Mm.
are certain ways to make it easier, and things that have worked for me uh, include what I call batching content.
Yep.
And so batching content, as you know, Amy, is where you might designate, let's say, one time slot per week, and it might be, let's say, maybe a 6 to 7 p.m. every Monday, right? Or it might be a morning every Monday, whatever. It probably would only take about 30 minutes to an hour. And what you do during that time slot is just focus on content creation. And you don't need to overthink it, but in that one time slot, you can quite easily create 2 or 3 pieces of content for that particular week. And so when we say posting content, frequently and consistently, it doesn't mean you have to sit down 3 different separate times per week and create content. You can create that in one batch, which makes things much easier. And if you're doing video content, for example, it might mean setting up the camera and recording, let's say, 2 to 3 minutes worth of video, or 2 to 3 different videos at the same time, and then you have 3 different pieces of content. Or you can take that 3-minute video and split it up into 3 1-minute pieces of video. The second thing I would say is repurposing content, and this also makes things much easier. So if you have written a blog previously or an article, you can repurpose that on LinkedIn as an article. You can also then take perhaps 3 or 4 different quotes from that article and create some quote images for LinkedIn. You can turn that article into a script for a video and create a video for LinkedIn. There are so many creative ways that you can do this, and that's called repurposing content, as you know, and that makes things so much easier, because you can take, let's say, one lengthy, long form piece of content and turn it into 3 or 4 or 5 short pieces of content. And the other thing I would say that makes things much easier, especially initially, is collaboration. Collaborate with other people. I mean, exactly like you and I are doing right now. You and I are in a very similar space. We have expertise in a very similar space, and we're sharing perspectives on a similar topic. And many people can do that. It doesn't matter if you are in the accounting industry, the finance industry, if you're a property person, if you are, it could be anything. It could be any industry. But what you can do is collaborate with either an industry expert or an influencer within that space, or a colleague, and jump on video, or a collaboration via an article and long form written content, whatever it might be, and just share perspectives. And this way, you're not only supporting another individual that's within your space, but you're also providing a lot more value to your audience. And so that is batching content, repurposing content, and collaboration as 3 tips I'll give.
Absolutely. I love all 3 of those. And I think they're really important to keep in mind. And one of the good tools that we now have, which we didn't have when we got started, Ahmed, is we can actually schedule through LinkedIn now itself on the platform. So, when it comes to batching, repurposing, that's when you can get really organized, and you can have it all scheduled out so that you're just doing your day-to-day, you're working with your clients, you're working with your customers, you're doing what you need to do. And your LinkedIn is just sort of running in the background and making sure that you're building brand that way as well. So I think that's really awesome. The other thing to look out for now is we've got all of these great AI tools. So I think really we've got no excuses to be able to create some quick content. That's me being, a bit accountability, Amy coming out there. But it really is around, whether you're doing video, whether you're doing text, whatever it is, there's so many different AI tools that you can actually help with that repurposing, with that batching that you mentioned, and that collaboration to support you. And so I think it's really comes down to just getting started, even if you don't feel ready. What would be your parting advice to people listening to this, Ahmed?
Yeah, look, for people that haven't created content before, I would say probably the best way and easiest way to get started on LinkedIn is start commenting on people's posts, right? So if you find yourself that you are lurking, like we all do when we start, right? I would just find posts that you resonate with and start adding your own perspective or your own opinion, or add a bit of value to that post, and you'll find that it starts getting a lot easier. You start putting yourself out there a lot more, and you get a lot more comfortable with it. And if you're someone that has posted content before, now you can probably look at being a little bit more strategic by trying to think about who exactly you want to be speaking to and reaching on the platform, and then trying to put yourself in their perspective, understanding what they're thinking about right now. So, for example, if you are in I was speaking to a property person yesterday, and the interest rates in Australia just went up, right?
Yes.
So that is something that impacts a lot of investors, and that's something that a lot of people would be thinking about within that space. So that's something perhaps you can talk about, and that's really talking directly to someone that has a particular pain point within your industry, and then you can go about providing either a solution or perhaps some encouragement or perhaps some perspective that can help them. So there's different ways of approaching it, but I would say get comfortable first, and then you can start focusing on being a little bit more strategic and deliberate in terms of what you're posting.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And I think, like we said, get in the way of opportunity. It's all there waiting for you on LinkedIn. You've just got to take that first step. And thank you so much for joining me, Ahmed. I know we could talk about this topic all day long. We have many times before.
Yeah.
So if you've watched this on the replay, I'd love to hear in the comments, what's your one thing or one big takeaway that you took from this discussion that you can use to support you with your LinkedIn content creation. And thanks again, Ahmed. I really appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you guys on LinkedIn. Feel free to give us a follow and connect, and you'll see these content strategies live as we do it ourselves, of course, on this platform. So thanks for joining, and see you next time.
Thank you, Amy. All the best.